This is the Upstate Hoops Podcast. Recorded live in the studios of FingerLakes1.com. Let's tip it off.
Happy Thanksgiving, Finger Lakes area basketball fans, and welcome to a special holiday edition of the Upstate Hoops Podcast. I'm Jim Sinacropi, and this is episode 3 of season 2. And as usual, I'm joined up here in the FingerLakes1.com studio in downtown Seneca Falls with my co-host, Matt Verkey.
Hey, happy Thanksgiving, Jim.
Happy Thanksgiving to you too, Verk. Nice day of eating, I suspect. And
yeah, I did some damage. Haven't been feeling that great, so didn't have a huge appetite, but I still managed to overindulge.
I ate and then ate more. You know, I was stuffed, and then I'm like, well, I'll just eat a little more, and then that really kind of put me out. But I'll kind of digested and happy to be in here tonight. And also, check this out. Tonight, a little something different. Usually he joins us later in the show via telephone, but tonight, for the first time in 23 episodes, we welcome Brad Connor in studio.
Hey guys.
Happy Thanksgiving, Brad.
Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
And to young Brandon, your third grade son, offspring.
Wanted to come in and watch the Magic tonight.
Rumor is he has his own power ranking tonight that we might hear later in the show.
It's been confirmed. We'll see if we can get it out of him.
Well, tonight's show is brought to you by Madej, Miras, and Ricky, your hometown personal injury attorneys. If you've been injured and deserve compensation, call the Finger Lakes Personal Injury Hotline at 315-568-0911. That's 315-568-0911. And also by Generations Bank with locations in Auburn, Geneva, Phelps, Seneca Falls, Union Springs, Waterloo, and coming soon, Farmington. Visit them online at mygenbank.com. And the Omen Theater, now showing at the Omen in Lyons, New York. Wreck-It Ralph. Visit omentheater.com for showtimes. So we have a great show on tap tonight. Hopefully you've enjoyed your Thanksgiving feasting and are ready to settle in with us for an hour and get caught up on what's been a busy week of college basketball. With Brad in studio and the start of the local high school basketball season about a week away, we're going to focus on the college game this week and take a look at Syracuse, who defeated Wagner on Sunday, and then took care of Princeton last night in the Dome to move to 3-0 on the season. We'll talk conference realignment and what Maryland's defection to the Big Ten means for Syracuse, the ACC, and the Big East. We'll have our updated power rankings and some Thanksgiving night trivia on Connor's Corner, this time courtesy of Bruce Connor. And a ton to talk about, but before we get into that, a quick programming note. Next week, November 29th at 9 o'clock, live in studio, Brandon Pascalacqua and Jimmy Ricky, a pair of seniors that comprise the starting backcourt for the Minders Blue Devils, will join us in studio to talk about their upcoming season and to help us preview the Finger Lakes East. Wow. A lot of talking.
A lot going on tonight.
Yeah, so we should probably get right into it and start with the Syracuse basketball game, Brad, that you and I attended last night in person, and Brandon was there as well. My general impression with that game, I was kind of impressed with Princeton, the way they were able to they space things on offense and make the zone work. And what happened, I thought, was that Syracuse got a little lazy in the zone because Princeton made them work so hard. And, that in the beginning of the second half, Princeton pulled within 6. But, Syracuse clearly better, more athletic, and pulled away in the end. Big game, James Sutherland had a great night offensively, although Boeheim was getting a little upset with him not covering the shooter in the corner. But your impressions, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, you pointed out, too, how Princeton is as patient as they are. It's hard to keep the zone active for 30-plus seconds of possession. And you saw that last night where, as patient as they could be, a lot of times they would get a backdoor cut. They would get somebody sneaking behind somebody, or get a drive-in dish and a kick out for open 3. And it wouldn't take them 25, 30 seconds, but they'd get those shots. And it's funny because you think of the San Diego State game, and there was probably no worse team for them to play than Syracuse outside when you can't shoot in the wind. There's probably no tougher team for Syracuse to play, with the exception of maybe a handful, than Princeton with the zone that they play.
True.
Because you can just if you're patient with it and you're athletic enough to get to the right spots, that you can do some damage. And we saw that at least for 30+ minutes.
And this is another example of a Syracuse team that's so deep in talent and so balanced in talent that if one or two guys has an off night, it's going to be a different guy each night, I think. And last night it was James Sutherland providing the offense. Verk, I know that prior to even the exhibition season, you were excited about Sutherland this year.
Yeah, and it seems like he's continuing that what's become a Syracuse tradition of the that scoring six man off the bench. It started with Chris Joseph. I think when Joseph was a sophomore, he was the scorer that came off the bench, or maybe even into his junior year. But
yeah, right.
And then Deion Waiters continued that last year just with the instant offense, and Sutherland seems to be, it's a little different in that he's a senior coming off the bench, but he's able to come off the bench and provide that instant offense. Boeheim likes to he'll go a little bit smaller, usually take out Christmas or Coleman and go with Sutherland, and he's kind of that guy off the bench who he might be the best six man in the country. It's kind of early to kind of come out with that kind of statement, but
Well, I agree with you, and that's going to go towards an argument I'm going to make later. In the show.
But I like the, it's almost like a tradition now at Syracuse to have that scoring, a six man who comes off the bench and provides plenty of scoring. He's somebody who could start for most teams and things like that.
It's almost as if Boeheim's got that as a strategy to have that sort of instant offense coming off the bench.
Yeah.
To, when the other teams start to tire after about 10 minutes, get that guy in there who's fresh and can just light it up immediately.
Yeah.
Like Deion Waiters last year.
Okay.
Yeah, and obviously it provides much more offensively. And, I read some of Boeheim's post-game press conference where he said, when teams are going to play them zone, especially Sutherland's going to be in there. Because really, the big guys on Syracuse aren't your going to score a lot of points. They get a lot of putbacks, things of that nature. But they're not really guys you can just throw the ball into and they're going to get their points. It seemed like Coleman had a better game last night than he did against Wagner, which he was just awful against Wagner the week before. 5 turnovers. I don't think he scored very much, but it seemed like last night he didn't turn the ball over. And, he's able to get 7 points.
He had a couple moments. Jim and I were talking about this at the game where, as strong as he is, he's 6'9", 270, right? Strong as an ox, but he's not ball strong yet.
Yeah.
For a Division I.
The Wagner game, I was shocked. They threw the ball to him 6-7 times, and he'd make a move and go up, and all of a sudden, these 6'6", 6'7" guys were taking it from him. It was kind of disappointing, but I do think he's between him, Christmas, and Keita, I think he's got the most skill. He can face up. He's got pretty decent moves. He just needs to adjust to the Division I level and faster guys and stuff like that. Another
interesting thing I think about Coleman is that he's in the center of the zone, and so in the starting lineup, Christmas is starting on the back line on the wing, and I think that's another reason why Coleman may have some limited minutes because apparently he can't play the wing.
Yeah.
So that means that if Boeheim he can't play Coleman with Keita. And when he plays Coleman with Christmas has to be on the wing, and I think Christmas is a lot better in the center. So I was surprised to see that he had Coleman in center, and I would say that that's more of a symptom of Coleman not being quick enough or smart enough to play on the wing.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out, but it seemed like Christmas had a pretty good game last night. I didn't see a lot of it, but
just one rebound though I think was the thing that bothered me with Christmas. I mean, he the eye test, he looked active out there. He made a jump shot, which was kind of nice from about 15 feet.
Yeah, he's showing a lot more range so far. Sure.
But for a guy like him to play 18 minutes and get one rebound, that's a little bit disappointing. 2 blocks though.
Yeah, but again, I think part of it too is because he's out on the wing. He's not always in position. I think one of the reasons we talked about this last night that he's out on the wing probably is because he's got such a longer reach that he can extend out on the shooters that much better on the wing, and that's where Princeton was doing a lot of damage on the corner threes, and he was flying out to it. He really wants to block the shot instead of actually play good position defense, but puts him out of position for rebounds a little bit when he does that.
Just looking at some minutes here that guy's played, do you think this is the start of Boeheim cutting down? Jeremy Grant didn't play too much last night, and neither did Cooney. Only played 11, 12 minutes, I believe. Was that just the way the game went? Or
well, let's talk about Cooney. He came out and was clearly forcing shots. Like you could tell he wanted to, bury like 3-4 in a row and get the dome rocking. And so, I think when Boeheim see him have that mentality on offense, he wasn't willing to play him that many minutes. And he wasn't as effective on defense as he was against Wagner when he had 6 steals. But, we got to remember, we get so excited waiting for Cooney and waiting for Coleman to come. These are their first college games. Sure, Cooney's a little different because he redshirted. He practiced with them all last year. But still, when you finally, after all that wait, get on the court, you got to have nerves. You got to have a little extra adrenaline. And, he's got to learn. He's got to become more comfortable, playing in game situation, I think.
That was one thing, too. The Wagner game, Cooney was – you could tell that he'd been with the program – while he's a freshman, he's been with the program now 2 years. Principle of the zone defense, he understood it as well as any freshman you've seen because he's been in it. And he understood – he was getting a lot of steals, very good positioning. Saw a lot of Andy Routens in him in that game. But on offense, that's where I think he struggles because, like you said, he forces it a little bit, really looking to be kind of that instant spark that he's not there yet.
Yeah, but he will. He'll come off the bench and rain in 3-4 threes and get the team going. But he's got to let it come to him. He can't just go in there with the mentality he's going to do it. So,
what about we talk about Cooney being a freshman and having the nerves. What was going on with Brandon Trish last night? 4-year starter.
It was an NBA tryout for him.
Yeah, Trish is the same. He's just the same. He's great. I mean, look at the stat line from Wagner: 21 points and 7 rebounds.
I thought he was really, really good against Wagner, and then I kind of I see the stat line. I read some quotes, and it just didn't seem like he had 5 turnovers against Princeton. I mean, a team really, obviously athletically they're not as good as most of the teams are going to play. He has 5 turnovers, 3 for 11, no 3-pointers.
Yeah, made 4.
But I think they defended him more smartly than Wagner did.
Yeah,
they sort of took away what he wanted to do, and he forced it anyway.
He had 2 or 3 open looks, wide open threes, where he was checking the wind in the dome, and he missed them all. And that's Brandon Trish for you.
Yeah, that's going to be a concern going forward for this team. Is we can't just rely on Sutherland to be our only. You're going to hope Cooney's going to hit some threes. Carter Williams 1 for 4, but Trish 0 for 3. Somebody else is going to have to, knock down some 3-pointers for them. You would think in the long run.
If Trish is off and Cooney's off, that is a little worrisome. But last night it was Sutherland that was on, and
again we talked about that last year. There's no go-to guy on this team. I don't think we're going to see it all year. Hubert Davis is going to hate it, but you know what? That's fine for this team.
But we're I don't know how many minutes into this discussion we haven't even mentioned C.J. Fair's name, and he could be the best player on the team. But he, has been quiet so far. 7 points, 4 rebounds in the Wagner game, and
12 points.
12 points, 6 rebounds, and so solid. But again, against Wagner and even Princeton, they didn't necessarily need.
Yeah, CJ's he's a great player. I think he's going to be a double guy a lot this year. But he's limited in what he can do because everything he does is going to the left. He's not a knockdown 3-point shooter. He's just one of those tweeners who kind of finds a way to score. He does it in a variety of ways, but you can do certain things that that kind of they like to get him come around the curl, going to the basket with his left hand, and he can be sometimes disappear.
Yeah, and like you say, disappeared in these 2 games, but he still put up, some decent numbers.
Quiet as 12 points.
Yeah.
If you would ask me how many points he had last night, I might have said 4.
Right. How about Carter Williams? He had, another coming off 11 assists and then now 9 assists.
I think most people, too, when, watching him would think that he didn't have great games, in both the Wagner and the Princeton game. But then you look at the fact that he had 11 assists against Wagner and 9 assists against, last night against Princeton, 6 boards in both games, 4 steals against Princeton. I mean, he's averaging 10 assists a game. So, and people are a little, not upset, but a little concerned that he's not, playing as well, not shooting as well, I guess, and making a few stupid turnovers. But the same thing with him, It's his team. He's been thinking about it all off season. He gets on the court. He gets a little too excited, tries to make too much happen himself. And once he becomes more comfortable, I think you'll see him have more consistency.
One thing I was worried about with him that I haven't seen yet is that he would try and force the spectacular pass rather than make the good one.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen that more this first 3 games so far, is that he's made really high percentage, good passes, getting the ball to guys in good spots, rather than trying, a 30-foot bounce pass through 2 guys and, trying to thread a needle. I think he's making smarter plays than I would have expected.
My biggest concern with him at the point is when you get a little, a 6 foot little jet on him, and the Wagner guys kind of got up on him a little bit and stripped him a couple times. But I just want to see his ball handling improve a little bit. Other than that, for his first 3 games in college, I think he's obviously playing well. He's doing what he needs to do. He's finding the guys when they're open. He's playing well. I think in just looking at the game in general, I know Syracuse forced 24 turnovers from Princeton, which they usually don't turn the ball over probably 24 times over 2 or 3 games. So I know Coach Boeheim was obviously happy with that. It's a good defense effort. You hold Princeton to 53 points. I know they play slower, but it's still a good effort, I think, defensively.
Yeah, and I feel like with this team too that anytime the opponent scores on us, that somebody did something wrong. The zone and the personnel we have playing the zone this year, as well as the past several years, if they can stay disciplined for the entire 35 seconds, it's tough to score on them. And that's what happened last night is they didn't. They would be disciplined for the first 20, 25 seconds, and then something would break down because they wouldn't stick with it. So, and I'm sure they will stick with it when they start, for instance, next Friday night at Arkansas. I think that'll just be another level of emotion that we'll see, if how they respond. But, these guys were number 1 in my power rankings last week, and I still believe Syracuse is the best team in the country. I'll tell you why. 6-man. Is there a better 6-man in the country than James Sutherland? I don't think there is. You might be able to make some arguments, but here's a question. Michael Carter-Williams. Would you trade Michael Carter-Williams right now? Not saying just his game right now, but if you could trade out with any other team in the country, would you trade their point guard for Michael Carter-Williams? Because I wouldn't do it.
I could think of a couple I might have.
Playing at the top of that zone?
Yeah.
Well, given the Syracuse style. Yeah.
Right.
I think he fits that style perfectly at the top of that zone.
And given his potential.
The potential might not be realized until he gets to the NBA, though, unfortunately.
Well, I'm thinking that we're going to see improvement through the course of the year, and by the end of this year, I think the answer to that question will be simple. Guy had averaging 10 assists a game, and
I think a guy like Aaron Kraft plays.
Yeah, but would he?
How would classic manner?
How would he?
Not in the zone, no, because
right.
he's 6'2", so he wouldn't cover as much ground in the zone. You're absolutely right.
And they're different players. Kraft's a one-on-one defender, and
right.
You don't really see that from Syracuse too much. But I think Kraft was the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year last year. They're obviously very different players, but both great players. And you're right. Carter Williams does fit the Syracuse scheme perfectly. He's that long, lanky, tall guy at the top of the zone. He's coming along. I think they're better at the point this year than they were last year between him and Scoop. Eventually, I think Carter Williams, his potential is going to be much better than, Scoop's kind of had a limited ceiling where Carter Williams is kind of off the charts. He's more athletic. He's bigger. He shoots the ball better.
Right.
But, we'll see. I guess, it's to be determined in my mind.
So, Michael Carter Williams, best point guard in the country.
I think we just established that, huh?
Well, let me just continue with this framework of this being the best team in the country. Brandon Trish is our shooting guard. There's probably a few shooting guards we might trade with him, but we're really not hurting at shooting guard. We got a solid free throw shooter, a big defender, physical player who can get to the hoop by himself. He can make the 3-point shot. He's a good rebounder and a little inconsistent, but we have, a senior shooting guard who's an All-American candidate. Would you?
Yeah, Trish is solid. I don't think you're not going to find he's not spectacular, and I wouldn't say he hasn't lived up to his potential necessarily. I mean, he's started every single game since he's been at Syracuse. He just hasn't been that had huge games for them. We thought. I think he kind of. I think last year, I don't know if Deion Waiters intimidated him or what the deal is with that, but,
right.
Trish disappeared at times. And, if he can knock down, 40% of his three-pointers, I think he can be an amazing player. I don't think he shoots the ball with confidence. Physically, he's strong. He can do everything. He's played the point. He's played the two.
Right.
He can do everything. He can get to the hole. He finishes strong. He's got a great left hand. he just needs to get it all together. And he seems like when he makes his first couple shots, then he really plays well. But there's also times where he's a little bit erratic. And as a senior, he needs to be that. He needs to provide that leadership this year and play well and not turn the ball over 5 or 6 times a game.
His head's got to be in the right place, and we see that when his confidence and he builds off of that. But we haven't seen it yet. Where if he gets down, he starts to mope a little bit. We haven't seen that yet. We could have seen that last night, and I don't think we did. But I'd worry in a big game
it's
if
also
that
tougher to
turns.
see that kind of thing from the crowd sometimes as it is on TV because you don't get the close-ups.
True.
We had decent seats, though. We were about 12 rows up behind the basket where the students normally sit.
Jim took good care of us with the seats.
And, normally I don't like sitting behind the basket, but if you get up just high enough, we had a good vantage point.
Yeah.
And the ribbon board, Verk, in the dome is awesome. The ribbon video.
Looking forward to it. I was telling Brad, I don't know if you heard me, but we bought tickets for the Georgetown game this year.
Really?
So I'm going with my wife and my brother-in-law and his wife. So looking
it'd be a
forward to
good
that.
year to do that.
Yeah.
One last argument in my best team of the for Syracuse being the best team in the country, the backcourt, the front line and the back line in the zone, our big guys, Coleman, Keita, who we didn't talk about, who's I thought was fantastic against Wagner, and he looks like his hands are not injured anymore, and he can score the ball, he can catch the ball, he can pass the ball, he can block the ball by Musa Keita. Raheem Christmas, who we talked about, and C.J. Fair. Now, would you trade that group for any other team in the country? Now, you might say Nerlens Noel, and Kentucky's crew, but you might say Cody Zeller. But I'm saying that whole package as a whole, would you trade him for anybody in the country?
It's probably not the whole package. If you include Sutherland in there, as a backcourt player or a forward player. Syracuse has 3 guys who are very good, but who can play the middle with Coleman, Christmas, and Keita. I don't think any one of them is the best center in the nation or anything like that.
Right,
but
individually,
but as a package, they're there. I'll give you. I think Syracuse has the potential to have the best defense in the country. I think it's just going to be a matter of if they can get to 70, 75 points a game this year. I'm still not sold on Carter Williams. Man in the point to be. I guess for me, it's just going to be how good they shoot the ball from the 3-point line, really. And that was an issue for them last year, and it didn't seem to slow them down. They obviously had an unbelievable year last year, they ended up losing 3-4 games. And they really
lost Fab. Got to throw that in there,
Yeah,
because I really think that if they had Fab in the middle of that defense going forward, they had a much better chance.
Well, that changed the entire Ohio State game if they'd had Fab in there against Sullinger.
Yeah.
And they didn't. Last year they weren't a great 3-point shooting team at all. And so I guess maybe they can hopefully imitate that again this year and lean on their defense a little bit early on until that offense kicks into full gear.
Yeah, to me, I think I wouldn't trade that front line defensively for any front line in the country. Offensively, I think we need to make sure we see more consistency offensively. Coleman's in and out. Christmas is getting better, but he's not quite there, I don't think. Fair, as we mentioned, he's kind of limited, and I'd like to see a little more well-rounded game from him. To me, I almost see Sutherland as a backcourt player as much as I see him a frontcourt player.
Yeah,
he's a tweener. Really, even though he's 6'8", 6'9", he's more of a shooter than he is a slasher anyway.
But he, and it's nice to be flexible to be able to put him either place. Obviously,
and you put Sutherland at the top of the zone too, and
forget about it.
How much damage you do there.
So we'll see him again on Sunday. They play Colgate at 1:00. I'm going to pick Syracuse in that one. But
don't they have some crazy streak? They haven't lost to Colgate in
I can't.
80 some odd.
Yeah, this is 1940s, something
right.
like that.
Play them every year.
And then a full 8 days off. Or no, not 8 days. I'm sorry. On Friday, they'll play at Arkansas. So we'll be back here next Thursday night, talk about that Colgate game, and then that at Arkansas game will be a game. Arkansas is undefeated, I believe. But we're going to talk all about the world of college basketball beyond Syracuse and get you caught up on all the action from this week because there's been a ton of it. It's been unbelievable with all the tournaments. Teams playing 3 days in a row. And we're going to also talk a little bit about realignment, conference realignment, and what the news of Maryland and Rutgers going to the Big Ten is going to mean for Syracuse and their future conference, the ACC, and their current conference, the Big East. So stay tuned for about 90 seconds as we hear from our sponsors. We'll be right back.
Attention Finger Lakes residents, have you been injured and deserve compensation? Call Madej, Maris, and Ricky, your hometown personal injury attorneys. Your case deserves personal attention. At Madej, Maris, and Ricky, they know you by name, not just a number on a folder. Call the Finger Lakes Personal Injury Hotline at 315-568-0911. That's 315-568-0911. Madej, Maris, and Ricky, your hometown personal injury attorneys.
The most valuable things are always passed down from generation to generation. It's true for your family, and it's true for our bank. For more than 140 years at Generations Bank, we've greeted you by name, planned with you for the future, and stood by you when you needed a hand. It's what we do, and what we'll continue to do for generations into the future. We might look different now, but in the important ways, we're exactly like we've always been. Stop in your local branch or go to mygenbank.com.
Yeah.
And welcome back to a special Thanksgiving evening edition of the Upstate Hoops podcast on FingerLakes1.tv. I'm Jim Sinacropi along with Matt Verkey and Brad Connor live in studio. Producer Jeremy Hunt running the show. And speaking of the Omen Theater, this Saturday, November 24th at 1 o'clock at the Omen Theater, they're hosting a free kiddie matinee showing of Wreck-It Ralph. So you can shop downtown Lyons while the kids are entertained for free at the Omen Theater, and that's this Saturday at 1 o'clock at the Omen Theater in Lyons. Well, I'm sure you guys were as shocked as I was to hear the news as it scrolled across the screen on Saturday night, the bottom of ESPN ticker, that Maryland was going to accept an invitation from the Big Ten Conference, leaving the ACC, where it was a founding member, and leaving the conference that Syracuse is about to join. And then shortly after that, there was word that Rutgers was going with them. So they announced it officially on Monday and Tuesday. And this whole thing that we thought had, died down has reared its head again. And you got to feel like, the ACC is going to make a move now. And they're talking about being either UConn or Louisville. It's just disconcerting for traditionalists, like I think we all are.
Yeah, looking at that, I think the Big East is in a lot of trouble. Now you got Boise State looking to back out, and a couple other teams, because apparently the Big East is losing their BCS berth. They're going to be pulled into with 5 other conferences. They're going to pull one team out of there.
The others.
So why is Boise State and BYU and whoever, I forget the other school, is going to come all the way over here and play in the Big East when they could just have just as good a shot to get to the BCS from the Mountain West Conference, which I think they're looking into. And football rules the world. And you look at a Florida State who's 10-1. And they're 10th or 11th in the BCS, where you got all these SEC teams who are 8-1, 9-1, 10-1, who are 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the BCS. I could see a Florida State, Virginia Tech looking to go to the SEC now. And I think the ACC is in a little bit of trouble because their football's been so bad.
Yeah, the ACC, if the ACC becomes the low man on the totem pole,
Yeah.
And that's the one that everybody gets drawn kind of up the ladder, or what the perceived ladder is, or I guess you measure the ladder not by success on the court or field, but by the dollars, in the conference coffers. And because the Big Ten has the Big Ten Network, they're the big cheese, and, SEC right behind them. And then you have the ACC and the Big 12, and below them, the Big East, because we're talking about football.
It's funny. It almost as if the Big East, the ACC has become the Big East, what the Big East was 10 years ago. The Big East is about to become Conference USA from 10 years ago.
Yep.
Everything has just shifted a tier downward.
And listen to this fact, if the ACC adds UConn or Louisville or Cincinnati, as they obviously are going to do, it will be 8 ACC teams, not all of them original members either, and there'll be 7 former Big East teams. So it will be about a 50-50 split, So why did you even start this in the first place?
And the ACC might, they might look outside of, a Louisville. I think they're going to look for a football school. I think Louisville's got to be on top of the list. They got to improve their conference a little bit, and UConn hasn't been that great in football.
Florida State won't be happy if they add UConn,
right?
At all. Oh man.
I just see these ACC schools like Florida State who are they're having a great year in football and they got no shot at the BCS title because of one loss, where all these SEC teams do. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Well, who would you think the ACC might look to if they weren't looking at a Big East team? I mean, who else is left?
I have no idea. I'd have to look around and see. Maybe one of these mid majors who, not a Boise State, but somebody like that who's good in football. Football kind of rules the world. And the other thing that was interesting, Maryland's paying a $50 million exit fee, I believe, to leave the ACC. Yeah. And this is a program who they are dropping some of their athletic programs because their athletic budget was not doing that great. And
not a problem anymore.
They're able to do that because there's the Big Ten Network. There's if you can pay $50 million, I don't understand how you can be dropping programs.
The Big Ten is actually. First of all, they're saying it's not going to be $50 million. They're saying they'll negotiate something lower, but the Big Ten's agreed to kind of loan the money. Big Ten will pay it off, and they'll garnish their Maryland's payouts over the next 5 years or whatever.
And I know Florida State AD has said he's going to watch very closely how much Maryland actually pays to leave because kind of they're already talking about them in the SEC and things like that. So. I don't know exactly. Who knows what's going to happen? Apparently, geography has nothing to do with anything anymore. Rivalries have nothing to do with anything. That's the biggest thing that you're going to miss. We talk about Syracuse going to the ACC. For Syracuse to play when Wake Forest comes to town, or any of those bottom of the ACC teams. Who really cares? And where even if it was a Seton Hall or St. John's or a Rutgers, there's history there. There's been games in the past, and you're excited for that game, But to see, a Wake Forest or Georgia Tech, somebody like that come up to the Dome, not that excited for it. And the bottom of the ACC hasn't been very good, so.
I think the ACC is in real trouble because I don't think they're ever going to be the football conference that they want to be.
Yeah,
and. When looking at it, you thought when they had Miami, Florida State, and Virginia Tech that they're going to rule football, and it just hasn't happened with the SEC. I think they're the last 6 national titles, and ACC's really not even been in the picture because Miami's been very down. Virginia Tech is down this year. They're going to have their first losing year probably since I can remember.
20 years.
And
Boston College is as bad as it gets in Division I.
Yeah. Which is scary, because is something like that going to happen to Syracuse's program?
Duke, Carolina, their football's no good. It's in football apparently everything is
which I don't understand because with all the basketball games that you can put on TV and the success of the NCAA tournament, I can't believe that basketball money is so much different than football money in terms of amounts. And for Syracuse is different. We there were 17,000 fans last night for Princeton. And we'll have several games over 30,000, so they make money at the gate.
I think Syracuse is a little unusual in that they make more off their basketball program than football. I would think in attendance and stuff like that. But most schools fit 8, 9, 10,000 people for a basketball game, and Michigan seats 120 for a football game, or Ohio State or a school.
But for the TV money, you can sell the conference tournament rights. You can sell the regular season, and then it just seems like it would. Is college football really that great?
It generates money, obviously, and that's what how many at a school like Syracuse, probably the football and basketball team actually come out on the plus side of things. I bet you the lacrosse team loses money. I bet you every other program they have loses money.
Absolutely,
and somebody's paying for those scholarships, and I know like William & Mary, my scholarship was donated. Somebody actually. I had to write a letter, thanking somebody for donating the money. It wasn't like it came out of that virus.
William & Mary wasn't reaping the benefits of a Colonial Athletic Conference TV deal.
Not then, and it's it's about money, and the Maryland felt that financially it was the right move to make, and they felt financially secure making that decision. And I'm sure they kind of felt that sick of being the little the little brother to Duke and Carolina and hoops.
The same thing is going to happen to us.
Yeah.
They're upset that everything happens on decisions made on Tobacco Row.
Yeah, every ACC tournament's in Greensboro. Why isn't it in D.C. or you know what I mean?
Right.
It's just,
And Syracuse is going to run into that same problem starting next year, and that's
Yeah.
going to frustrate us as long as we're in the ACC.
I'm even concerned about the officiating. If Syracuse is in contention for the title going down the stretch, and they got to play at Carolina or at Duke, how the officiating would go that game. But
Which is probably what the Providence and Marquette and DePaul fans think of Syracuse right now.
So, you mentioned the ACC being in trouble. What happens if Florida State and Clemson, for example, go to the SEC?
ACC is going to be reaching out, obviously, like you said, to a couple other schools, but I don't think realignment's done by any means, and I really think the football schools are going to be looked to going to the SEC, Florida State and Virginia Tech.
Or the Big Ten could grab Georgia Tech, or the Big Ten, could even grab North Carolina.
Well, it's so crazy. It's like West Virginia this year in the Big 12, or is that what it's called? Is it still the Big 12?
Every game they play is 1,000 miles away.
Right, and it's just weird. It doesn't make sense, especially now in hoops. You know what I mean? It's just so weird to have West Virginia in the Big 12. It doesn't even make sense, and that's why I forget what conference they're in, because they're an East Coast team and they're playing in the Big 12.
I honestly think that realignment will never stop. It will always morph. It will always evolve. Some new conference commissioner will come in and have some new strategy and then want to split them up or want to do divisions, and somebody doesn't like it. And, Texas runs the Big 12 and they want to do something completely different than the rest of the Big 12. And so they can pull their own conference together. There's always these wild cards that are out there that I don't think we'll ever see.
Texas
resolve.
might not have too much of a say if they keep losing to Division II teams. So.
In basketball. Now, the Big 12 is also in trouble. So now and this is the same situation, following this conference realignment from several months ago, from a Big East perspective, was you're looking at, if they go for Big 12 teams and the Big 12 gets scuttled, then that's Big East absorbs them. But it looks like the Big 12 is surviving, where and the Big East obviously is not, and the ACC is now, got the kind of target on them.
Well, yeah, I think the concern for the Big East is you're looking at, people have talked about having 4 super conferences with 16 teams in it, and the Big East wouldn't be one of them. You're going to go Big 12, Big 10, ACC, SEC, I would think. And, it's just going to be crazy.
Let's say it develops like that. What happens when the Pac-12 says we're going to take Texas and Texas Tech?
I forgot about
that. Was what was rumored to happen a year ago.
The Pac-12 could be one of the super conferences over the ACC, really, football-wise. I mean, they're obviously better.
You got to think that's what the ACC's objective is to be that 4th conference instead of the Big 12. But obviously they're not on path to do that right now.
And the problem is there's no rule that says there has to be 4 conferences. There should be 8 conferences. It's.
But I could see, Nick Saban's talked about it too, where they say we got these 4 super conferences and we're only going to play each other. We're going to have our own national championship, and other guys can do whatever you want.
Nobody will care.
It would be crazy. Yeah. There could be 2 national champions. I mean, really, you got all these other teams on the outside, and these schools got the money. And
but you also wonder if, in some point down the road, football just breaks apart. There is no such thing as a football conference anymore, or the football conferences are just this abstract, separate realm of reality, and everybody else has their own conferences.
Yeah.
So basketball aligns with volleyball and wrestling and track and everything else. Football has 4 super conferences, and then basketball and everything else aligns with
Well, I think
more
that would be a
geographically.
wonderful world. Honestly.
But I think the conferences stay in play because they like the conference championship games. It's another game where it generates $10 billion playing in the SEC championship, the Big 12 championship, all these things. And
but they've proven they have a different set of rules for football than do for basketball anyway. It's not an NCAA sanctioned championship.
Yeah,
it hasn't been for 20 years.
That's where you got to look to in all this is the NCAA, the one governing body that could have brought some sort of reason to this, just has been totally non-existent.
Yeah, and it's nice to see, they're going to an and 1 apparently in the BCS where there's going to be a little bit of a playoff, right? They're going to have the 4 BCS
4 teams,
semifinals.
So, you're still, if you're that 5th team, obviously on the outside looking in, but,
Notre
Dame could have went undefeated this year and not had a shot at the title if things didn't work out with the 2 losses to 1 and 2 last week. which obviously isn't fair. What more could you ask out of Notre Dame football than what they did this year?
Or you know what? The thing about it is the SEC. This has turned into a football conversation, but real quick, the SEC is really top heavy. So why does Alabama get to have a one loss and they still get to play? Why are they the one? Just because preseason rankings
Based on strength of schedule and they throw it all on the computer, and the SEC does well outside the conference. That plays into it. Yeah, it's tough to tell. I know how good's Florida.
We always see that the preseason rankings.
The
People
polls
shift up.
matter in the BCS formula. The AP poll.
We'll see this weekend because Florida State plays Florida, which is a huge game. ACC, SEC, and I think Georgia plays South Carolina. So if no, that's both.
Notre Dame plays USC.
Yeah. Notre Dame plays USC, but there's South Carolina plays somebody else. There's somebody different.
Clemson?
Too. Yeah, I think no, they already played Clemson and beat them. I think, but I know there's a couple games that could shift the view of the SEC a little bit if they end up losing.
Well, it's this conference realignment stuff gets me kind of fired up. It's because it destroyed a perfectly happy world I lived in called
the worst thing
Big East basketball.
Yeah, and the worst thing to me about Syracuse going is that they're not playing in the Big East tournament in Madison Square Garden.
Oh, it's
that is the highlight of. I look forward to that as much as I look forward to the NCAA tournament. Really, the Big East tournament was so big in the Garden, and you got to experience it last year firsthand, and that's going to be missed playing in the Garden in the Big East tournament.
But even if Syracuse was in the Big East, next year's Big East tournament won't be the same. As teams continue to leave, and you're at
but
Houston,
from a basketball
Central Florida,
perspective,
those guys. It's less relevant as it used to be.
It is, but from a basketball perspective, the conference is still pretty strong. At least for now.
Yeah.
Now with UConn, Louisville, Cincinnati leave, not as strong.
Yeah.
Not even the same conference in the same way.
It's not at all.
That, hey, like I say, if Florida State and Clemson defect, or if Georgia Tech leaves, or any other ACC team leaves, it might be Virginia Tech to the SEC.
But they were never a relevant basketball school in the Big East anyway.
But you're going to end up with more Big East teams than ACC. Great job, John Swafford. You've really done it this time.
The irony of him getting his conference eaten up when he was the one that really spurred a lot of this on in the first place.
Yep. Well, let's move on from all that, because we did promise that we had a lot of talk about in terms of actual play on the basketball courts this week. It was college basketball feast week, and my general impression that stuck out to me from all the games this week is that Georgetown's pretty good, and their point guard Starks is really good, and Otto Porter might be the best player in the country, and I guess kind of a pleasant surprise to see them so good, seeing that this might be the last year we play them in the Big East tournament or the Big East regular season, and those are going to be great games because Porter is dominant, and Starks was very impressive, and that was the one that I had kind of came out of nowhere for me.
Let's hope that's the last bit of praise you offer to Georgetown this season.
Starks looked a little Allen Iverson-ish. He's so quick. So
they're solid. Yeah, that was impressive what they were able to do. The biggest eye opener I saw was Butler taking apart North Carolina.
Yeah,
and Butler is
up 29 points at one point.
They've just and beating Marquette at the buzzer the night before.
But then Butler got taken apart by Illinois.
Right, Illinois is a good team now this year because the Ohio coach came over to Illinois. I think they're
another
they're
team. The Big Ten is very good this year in basketball, but Georgetown took Indiana, obviously, pretty much the consensus number one team in the country to overtime. And I've seen bits and pieces of North Carolina. I don't see it for them this year. They got some good players. I just don't think they lost obviously a ton of talent. 4 or 5 draft picks or whatever they had last year. I just don't see them being that. I think they're. Everybody's got them in the top 10. I don't think they're a top 10 team in the country right now, and a lot of people will probably drop them out of the top 10 after losing by 30 to Butler. But a Butler team who's got a couple losses now. They lost to Xavier. They lost to Illinois. I just don't see it for North Carolina. They're good. They're talented. Just James Michael McAdoo. He's a good player, but he's not great. He's not
He's
unbelievable.
not refined.
Yeah.
He's similar to Coleman, in a way, in the way that they're playing. And North Carolina's defense was just horrible in that game. I couldn't believe how many wide open shooters they were leaving for Butler.
Roy Williams teams tend to do that from time to time. They just fall asleep on defense.
And
Occasionally, they
let someone like Jerry McNamara hit 1 million threes in the national championship game.
Exactly.
Well, let's run down conference by conference kind of what's been going on here, and let's start with the Big East. Right now, there's only 3 undefeated teams in the Big East, and as a whole, the conference is not looking as dominant as it has in the past several years. They had a nice little run there, but at this point, you got Cincinnati at 4-0. They haven't really played anybody yet, but they got Iowa State Friday night and then Alabama next Saturday, so they'll be tested. That's your neck of the woods, Brad. What do you take of the 4-0 start by the Bearcats?
I've seen quite a bit of them this year. Obviously, I think they're impressive. Their backcourt is as good as anybody. I mean, I think they stack up pretty well to Syracuse, really, backcourt wise. I mean, Kashmir Wright's a great point guard. Jaquan Parker's strong guard slasher, good rebounder for a small guy, and I think they've got some growing to do inside, and I think that's part of the problem. Sean Kilpatrick is going to be their star, and he's had big numbers. He had 29 in a game against, I think it was Campbell the other night, and they've.
Brad turns to his third grade son for confirmation on how many.
Campbell's the team before that.
It was the team before that, North Carolina A&T. So they haven't played anybody good.
Yeah, right.
But they've got this good tournament coming up. They've got Iowa State and then potentially UNLV in Vegas. So that should be a good test for them. Mick Cronin's a good coach. He's not very well received in Cincinnati for whatever reason. I don't know. I
like him.
It's kind of
They
weird,
should love
weird
him
dynamic.
from where they were to where they are now.
Exactly. So I think there's still some questions there, but they've taken apart every team they've played. So I don't think their 4-0 is smoke and mirrors yet.
And Syracuse is one of the other undefeated teams, and then you got Louisville at 3-0. They're playing Northern Iowa right now. I don't know if we got a score update. And then they have 2 big games in
Louisville's
December.
up 3-2.
Oh wow!
I got your update.
I'll mark that as a win. Louisville's now 4-0. They got Memphis and Kentucky in December, so we're going to see what they're all about in those 2 games. And then 7 one-loss teams. You got UConn, who beat Michigan State and Wake Forest, and then Quinnipiac takes them to double overtime. Shout out to Pat Patchen.
That's right.
On the Quinnipiac double overtime thriller, and then they lose to New Mexico, who's a solid team. But
yeah, I think that's going to be. We're going to see that a lot this season from UConn. They're going to have some impressive moments, and then they're going to stub their toe quite a bit. They don't have a lot of balance on that team. I think they're pretty guard heavy, so we'll see how that sustains them.
Yeah, I mean, just it's still so early. A lot of the power conferences, their schools got losses to some of the mid majors and stuff like that. I haven't seen any. You look at the bottom. You got DePaul at 2-3, Villanova 3-2. Villanova's really dropped off. St. John's was a little disappointing at 3-2 coming in. They got some good players. I look for them to improve. But top to bottom, the Big East, there's not any terrible teams outside of maybe DePaul. I think Villanova might end up being a little better, but
I think DePaul's 2-3. But you know what? I mean, I thought this year maybe
How is DePaul always
Melvin
so bad?
Cleveland.
They're in
Cleveland,
Chicago.
Melvin.
How much talent is there in Chicago? Why are they always so bad?
I guess the facilities aren't good.
Yeah.
They don't.
They don't play on campus. They're out by the airport.
Their logo is kind of
a
ugly.
Pretty depressing place.
But they have talent on this team.
Right. Is it coaching? I mean, Oliver Purnell.
They just fired
still
their
there?
coach a couple. Yeah, Purnell's still there. He took over for.
He's the
been successful
program
most
builder.
places.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Purnell's a program builder. But of course,
he was the coach at Old Dominion when I played in the Colonial.
Yeah, he went to Dayton and Clemson. I think
Yeah.
he's had good success everywhere.
Yeah.
so the other one-loss teams in the Big East are Marquette, who lost on that hook shot by Butler. They really should have won that. Honestly, should have won that game. That shot shouldn't go in. Not 9 times out of 10.
Right.
You got Notre Dame, Pitt, Seton Hall, Georgetown, Rutgers all losing 1 game. Most Georgetown was to a good
Who's,
number one Indiana. Pitt was to Michigan.
Yeah,
last night.
Pitt's tough. I watched them play twice. They got the foreigner, the big white
Freshman
kid.
from New Zealand.
Yeah, he looks pretty good. Everybody's raving about him.
Trayvon
I wasn't crazy about him, but he's gonna be a solid player for them. But people are talking about him being a top 5 pick. I didn't really see that, but we'll see how it all plays out. But Pitt's always tough. Obviously last year was a big down year for Pittsburgh, really.
Yeah.
And they're obviously looking to bounce back.
First time in a long time that Pitt had a year like that. It was probably because of the news of them going to the ACC. It just started immediately decreasing in quality. And then the 2 lost teams of the Big East: Providence, South Florida, St. John's, and Villanova, who
What
got
happened to them?
smacked by Columbia
On their home court.
Really?
Yeah.
By
I didn't
see
18
that.
points. they lost.
Unbelievable. It's
Brutal.
and I didn't take too close a look at Villanova, but they have a good power forward. I can't think of the guy's name. Should have looked up their roster.
Yaru?
Yeah, Yaru but that's not even the guy I'm thinking of. But shocking, to see that.
They they weren't good last year, and their 2 best players left early go pro.
Yeah.
Maurice Cheek and the other guard
Fisher.
there. So, you think sometimes you get better addition by subtraction, kind of, but doesn't seem to be the case. They did beat Purdue, but obviously losing to Columbia at home is not good. So
They've got a pretty good freshman. I can't even say his name. Archie Diacono or something like that. Shooter is going to be a good player. But again, if you're relying on young guys, you're going to see a lot of this in the Columbia.
And next year they have a really good class coming in. So
again, another team with no excuse to be bad, sitting there in Philadelphia with the talent pipeline they should have there.
yeah. I mean, and they have been. I mean, that's why it's so shocking, because they were, an Elite 8 team. They were a top 10 caliber program for much of the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the ACC. 4 undefeated teams in the ACC right now. Duke's 4-0. They beat Kentucky. They beat Minnesota today, too, pretty handily. They got Ohio State on Wednesday night in Cameron. And then other than that, they got Temple at a neutral site on 12/28. Their first true road game, is January 12th at NC State. So, why isn't Vitale
good luck
or
hearing about
Gottlieb
that, right?
all over that? I mean, they're give them credit. They played Kentucky at a neutral site, and they're playing Ohio State. That's a tough enough pre-conference schedule. But, how about a road game? One out-of-conference road game. Syracuse going to Arkansas.
Well, and the reason Syracuse never plays out of the dome really in November, December is because, as we talked about, revenue.
Yeah.
And Duke is the exact same way. They get no revenue from their football. Their basketball makes all their revenue, so they're going to have home games.
Yeah, but they only seat 1,400 people in that gym.
It's true. But they charge $1,000 a ticket, though.
And you got Virginia Tech at 4-0. The Hokies, but they haven't really been tested. They will be. They got Iowa. Well, I guess they will be. They got Iowa on November 27th, Oklahoma State on December 1st. They're at West Virginia on December 8th, and they're at BYU on the 29th. But 4-0 start for the Hokies. And Clemson is playing Gonzaga right now, I believe.
Yeah, that's coming up.
They're undefeated. They're one of the 4 undefeateds. And Georgia Tech's also undefeated.
I think
Clemson's up 10-9.
I think the shock of the ACC for me this week was NC State getting beat pretty good. Everybody's been so high on them this year, and not saying that one game makes the season, obviously, but a little surprised that they, not only that they lost, but they got it handed to them pretty good.
Yeah, they beat UMass by 28 points and then get beat up bad to Oklahoma State. They got Michigan at Michigan on Tuesday, and then UConn next after that on December 4th. So tough couple games there for NC State. They certainly, didn't want to lose to Oklahoma State. You got North Carolina, who we mentioned earlier, got spanked by Butler pretty bad. They got number 1 Indiana next week as part of the ACC Big Ten Challenge. And Florida State is 4-1 after losing to South Alabama. But they did beat St. Joe's and BYU. They got Florida on December 5th. and they play Minnesota in that or ACCC Big Ten stupid challenge. Those are some good games. That's not one of the best ones. Florida State, Minnesota, Miami. I thought they were one of my surprise teams in the ACC. They're 2-1 though after losing to Florida Gulf Coast by 12. So that's not good. That's going to be good for recruiting for Florida Gulf Coast, as they could tell people that they beat Miami by 12. They got Michigan State in Miami for the challenge. They're at UMass on December 1st, and then what else we got going on in the ACC? Virginia's 4-2. They lost to George Mason in Delaware. Wake Forest 2-2, lost to UConn and Iona, and Boston College 2-3, lost to Baylor, Dayton, and College of Charleston.
There's some problems at the bottom of the ACC.
Yeah, 2-3 BC. Wow.
And Wake Forest didn't just lose to Iona; they got drilled by Iona by like 25. That was bad.
And Iona doesn't even have Scotty Mikado anymore.
No.
But
And, I think Delaware, they beat Virginia. I think they're going to be the class of the Colonial this year. They're going to be pretty good. But, Virginia not off to a great start either.
in the Big 12, you got 5 undefeated teams. Kansas State, who beat Notre Dame, Iowa State, Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State actually beat Tennessee and NC State. It took them overtime, though, to beat Akron. Texas Tech's undefeated. They beat Providence for probably their best win. And Oklahoma's undefeated, hasn't really played anybody. 4 one-loss teams in Baylor, Kansas, TCU, and West Virginia. And Texas is at 3-2. They lost to USC in overtime and by 13 to Chaminade. So, I mean, Longhorn Nation's got to feel good about that one. You know.
They don't care about basketball anyway.
That's true. Rick Barnes.
It wasn't even really a game. They were losing the whole game, and I think they ended up losing by double figures, didn't they?
13 points, yeah. It's kind of shocking.
Rick Barnes has to have pictures of somebody. No explanation for how he survives.
Jumping to the Big Ten, looking like the best conference this year from what we've seen so far. 6 undefeateds: Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Nebraska, Northwestern, and Ohio State. Now, a couple key games in all this, like Ohio State's aircraft carrier game got, canceled. So we haven't really had a good chance to take a look at them. 3 one-loss teams in the Big Ten: Iowa, Michigan State, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. And then you got Penn State at 2-2 and Purdue at 2-3. So, they're off to a good start. We've seen Indiana get tested and come through 2 times. We've seen Illinois win today. Did they win today?
They did.
Yeah. So to win that whatever conference tournament or preseason tournament they were in. Was it Butler?
They took Butler apart. It was a 15, 18-point game.
Michigan got tested against Pitt. They win that preseason event in Madison Square Garden. And, Big Ten.
There's a lot of depth in the Big Ten. I mean, there are very few bad teams in the Big Ten where, the ACC obviously has got bad teams. Big East has a few bad teams. The Big Ten has very few really bad teams, real easy wins. I think that's going to be a real dogfight all season. Really.
Yeah, and they're top-heavy, too. They're balanced with a lot of power at the top.
Yeah.
Indiana, Michigan, and Ohio State. And
Yeah.
It looks like Illinois is going to move into that group, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe this is a year Northwestern finally gets that at-large bid, too.
Let's talk about the A-10. 2 undefeateds. Charlotte hasn't played anybody. Charlotte. And Temple, who beat Kent State for their best win. But they have 7 one-loss teams and have some good wins. Like Xavier beat Butler, and then today they lost to Pacific. Richmond's 4-1. They lost 72-57 to Minnesota for their only loss. Not really too many quality wins in there, but nonetheless 4-1. Dayton's 3-1, beating Boston College by 16 and Auburn by 10. Then they lose to Colorado. St. Joe's is 3-1 after beating Notre Dame in overtime. They also beat Harvard. Their one loss to Florida State. LaSalle's 3-1 with the one loss coming to Central Connecticut State. And the Bonnies from St. Bonaventure, 3-1 with their only loss coming at the hands of in-state rival Canisius. VCU's 3-1. They lost by 2 to Wichita State for their only loss, and they beat Florida Gulf Coast.
They beat Memphis tonight too.
Oh, did they? No
Yeah.
kidding. There's a breaking
So they're
news.
already gone. They're a full member of the Atlantic 10.
They are.
Yeah.
100%, yeah.
I guess
4-1.
I didn't
Yeah, they had a
realize
quick
that.
buyout of the Colonial for whatever reason.
Wow.
And the same thing with Butler. Butler's in the A10 now, which is kind of odd because they're 3-2 now. They beat Elon, Marquette with that hook shot, and UNC by taking them out back of the woodshed. Then they lost to Xavier in Illinois, playing Xavier out of conference.
Yeah, because
it
they
was
had that scheduled
previously
before
scheduled,
the
yeah.
league change happened, right?
So they'll play Xavier
They'll play them again.
only twice or maybe 3 times.
I think probably only twice.
Yeah, there's a lot of...
Because there's so many teams in the A10,
Yeah.
I don't think there's home and home with anybody anymore.
Yeah. Good old UMass is at 2-2. They beat Harvard and Providence, so protecting their region, but then they lost to NC State and Tennessee. St. Louis is 2-2. They lost to Santa Clara and Kansas, but they beat Texas A&M. So we're getting down towards the bottom of this conference, and I haven't really mentioned any bad teams in the A10. Then you got Duquesne at 2-3, George Washington at 1-2, Fordham's 1-4, and Rhode Island's 0-4. So that those last 4 aside, I think everybody else is a contender for a berth.
This league's crazy. This could easily be a five bid league, which is astonishing that a non-BCS league would be that deep. But bringing VCU and Butler in, obviously, Xavier's probably a bit lower than they've been. They've lost a lot of guys, so this is probably a rebuilding year for them. But Temple will always be in there. Richmond's they're going to be below 500 in the league, I'm sure. But Dayton's solid. VCU obviously.
St. Joe's.
It's a good league.
Top
UMass
down.
is decent. I mean, they're up and down the line. St. Louis is always going to be strong. Majerus has got a good program running there. I mean, it's a better league than probably the Pac-10. It's a better league than the ACC as far as depth is concerned, in my opinion.
Sure. Yeah, and Jim, you mentioned too with all this realignment and bigger conferences, you miss the home and homes. You get Louisville, for Syracuse coming into town, or Georgetown. This year we played both them twice, but it stinks when you see a team once every 3 years or something like that, and
Right.
That's why I kind of like the smaller conferences, just because you play everybody and it's more balanced out. And just like with the Big East, they have an unbalanced schedule, and it depends on who you play and where you play them, and things like that can determine the conference champion.
Speaking of conference champions in the Colonial, William & Mary's 3-1, and with the defections out of that league, is William & Mary win this conference or what?
No, they don't win the conference. But I did get to see them play on TV against Liberty, and they got a great backcourt. They got probably one of the better players by this Marcus Thornton. By the time he leaves William & Mary, might be the best player to ever play there. Possibly, he's very athletic. He's averaging 17, 18 points a game this year as a sophomore. He's just the type of player we usually don't get there. And he can do a lot of everything. You can give him the ball, he can go 1-on-1, which we kind of lack in the past. We run a Princeton type offense where we do a lot of cut and shoot a lot of threes, and we're just not real athletic in the front court. But they have a shot to be decent, and VCU's in the A10, and Old Dominion is actually on their way out. They're not eligible for the conference tournament this year. And I was just looking; they're 1-4 this year, which is shocking because Old Dominion's typically towards the top of that. But William & Mary, we had our chances. We've actually never been to the tournament, but we played in the conference championship 2 of the past 4 years, and obviously lost those games to VCU. Obviously, George Mason is still there. They're I would have to say they're the class of the league this year. They beat Virginia. They're playing a great non-conference schedule, but they are on the cusp of leaving also, and they decided to stay. They probably had a better shot with VCU and Old Dominion to get to the tournament than going to Atlantic 10 or something like that.
Yeah, that's kind of what it's about.
George Mason stayed, which was nice for the conference. They're also getting a couple teams coming in there from some of the other. From the Big South Conference, I think they're getting a couple teams that are going to come over to the. The Colonial has been pretty good. They've won games. Sending VCU to the Final Four. Sent George Mason
multiple bids.
Yes, we had multiple bids a couple years. We sent George Mason to the Final Four, VCU to the Final Four. I mean, we got more Final Four bids in the last 4 or 5 years than some major conferences probably.
And what's the reward for them? They get plucked.
Yeah, exactly. And and when we sent 2 teams, Old Dominion beat Notre Dame the one year, and then VCU went on that great run. But they win games. The teams that do get in the tournament have won games, and it's a tough conference. When you got George Mason, Old Dominion, VCU. Teams like that. It's a good conference.
Northeastern's 3-1 also in the Colonial, and they beat Boston U, Princeton, Vermont, and UC Riverside for their 3 wins.
And the Colonial really expanded from 8 teams when Brad and I were there. They added Northeastern. Yeah. They lost American. They lost Richmond, but
I don't know if VCU in the league when
they came in my junior year, and they came in '95, and they were good. They came from the Sun Belt or something that dismantled,
right?
And they won the conference championship my senior year. But so even back then there was some conference realignment going on. But.
Yep.
Well, at the risk of running out of time here with so much left to do with trivia and power rankings, I'm going to just run through some. These conferences really quickly here. Like the SEC with 6 undefeated teams. Alabama's 4-0 with wins at Oregon State, and they beat Villanova by 22. They're at Cincinnati on December 1st, so that's one to mark on your calendar. Florida's 4-0. They had the Georgetown game canceled. They beat Wisconsin. They got Marquette. They beat Marquette. They beat they play Florida State on December 5th and Arizona on December 15th and K-State on December 22nd. So Billy Donovan's club's got a tough stretch there before their conference starts. Ole Miss is 4-0, but they played nobody. They got Rutgers at home on December 1st, and honestly, their toughest other game it's not even a tough game. It's Fordham. So Arkansas's 3-0. They've played nobody, too. This is the team Syracuse faces next Friday. They got Arizona State this Friday night, and then their next game is Syracuse. Then after Syracuse, they play Oklahoma and at Michigan. So tough stretch for Arkansas, starting with Syracuse next week. LSU's 3-0, also played nobody. They got Seton Hall on November 29th and at Marquette on December 22nd. That's really it for them in terms of competition in their pre-conference. Missouri's 4-0. They beat Stanford earlier today. They have Illinois on December 22nd and at UCLA on December 28th. They beat Stanford today. Yeah, they beat Stanford today. Kentucky's 3-1. We all know all about them. Texas A&M's 4-1. They had one loss coming to St. Louis. South Carolina's 3-1. They beat Milwaukee, Wisconsin in overtime. Morgan State, Rider, and lost to Elon by 12. They play St. John's on November 29th. Tennessee's 3-1. They lost to Oak State, beat UMass. They play Georgetown on the 30th of November. Memphis on January 4th. And they're also playing Xavier at UVA and Wichita State. So Tennessee's playing a tough schedule. Vanderbilt's 1-1. They lost by 26 to Oregon. Auburn's 2-3. Georgia's 1-4. Mississippi State's 1-4. Georgia loses to Youngstown State by 12. Southern Miss in overtime, then loses to Indiana by 13 and UCLA by only 4. They're 1-4. Go Bulldog Nation. Conference USA has 5 undefeateds, but honestly, nobody's played anybody. The Mid-American, Ohio's 4-0. They have Richmond and St. Bonaventure next.
They're a good team. They'll be back in the tournament this year, I think.
Yeah, it's looking like
Sweet 16 team last year.
Southland, Stephen F. Austin's undefeated at 3-0, but their best win was Florida International. The Missouri Valley has 5 undefeateds, and this conference is insane, guys. Wichita State 6-0. They beat VCU, DePaul, and Iowa. Creighton's 4-0. They're in Brad's top 5 power rankings, and will they make an entrance in one of ours tonight, perhaps? Mm-hmm. Their best wins against UAB, though, but they got Wisconsin Saturday, St. Joe's on December 1st, Nebraska December 6th, and Cal on the 15th of December. No other real test for Creighton. Illinois State's 4-0, Northern Iowa's 3-0, Southern Illinois is 3-0, and every other team in the Missouri Valley is at 500 or better. So,
Missouri, decent league. That's been a multiple bid league in the past too.
Yeah, and they're looking stronger than ever. The Mountain West, another really strong conference, who's looking to hopefully retain some Big East teams that they've, that said they were going to leave. 5 undefeated. Air Force is 5-0. Easy wins over poor opponents. Same with Wyoming at 5-0. Colorado State at 4-0 and UNLV at 2-0. Nobody's played anybody. New Mexico's 4-0 though, with wins over UConn and George Mason, and Davidson. 4 one-loss teams, San Diego State, Boise State, Fresno State, Nevada. So that's another top-to-bottom strong conference, the Mountain West. The Ohio Valley, 2 undefeateds. Belmont, 4-0. They beat Stanford, and Eastern Kentucky's 4-0. Murray State's 3-1 with wins over Auburn and St. Joe's, and they lost to Colorado, which brings me to the Pac-12 with 5 undefeated teams. Colorado at 4-0, who beat Dayton, and number 16 Baylor and Murray State. So the Colorado Buffaloes don't know much about them, but they're.
I think they were a tournament team last year, weren't they? Or were they right on the cusp?
Last year or 2 years ago, they were in. Yeah, they're top. I think they were 23rd, 24th in the country this week.
They'll probably rise on Monday. Oregon's 4-0. They beat Vanderbilt. They killed them 74-48. That's a blowout. Arizona's 3-0. Their best win was probably UTEP. They got some tough games coming up, though. Arizona State's 3-0. Their best win was against Cornell. Really weak pre-conference schedule for them. California's 3-0. They go at Wisconsin. Then they got number 18 UNLV and Creighton in consecutive games starting on December 2nd. UCLA's 4-1. They got spanked by Georgetown, and their best win was probably Georgia, and they're 1-4.
I think that was a tough one for UCLA with Muhammad back for the first game. Really getting him re-entered into
chubby too, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's probably not as chiseled as he'll be, but it was a tough matchup against a tough Georgetown team for a team that didn't know they were going to have Muhammad up until probably 24 hours before the game started.
Right, yeah, that's true. Then you got Utah, who lost to Sacramento State, if you can believe that. Stanford's 3-2, USC's 3-2, Washington's 3-2, Washington State's 2-3. Oregon State also has 1 loss in the Pac-12. Which brings me to the Patriot League, where Bucknell is 5-0. They won at Purdue, beat George Mason, won at Niagara, and beat New Mexico State. Bucknell's a team we've seen in the tournament before, and they're off to a hot start. The West Coast Conference has 3 undefeated teams. Santa Clara's 4-0. They beat St. Louis. Gonzaga's 3-0, beating West Virginia by 34 points, 84-50 back on the 12th of November. They played Clemson. They're playing Clemson right now. Maybe we get a score update on that
Clemson
one.
24-20.
Oh, I'm going to call that one for Gonzaga. St. Mary's is 3-0. No notable wins. They played a game today, I believe, as I was coming down here at the Bahamas or something. They really have a weak pre-conference schedule. The only team of note is Harvard on December 30th. The Big West, fellas. Cal State Northridge is 6-0. But they did beat Pepperdine, Siena, Tulsa, and San Diego to get to that mark. So keep an eye on Cal State Northridge. Other New York teams on the American East, Albany's 4-2. They beat Washington and Duquesne. They lost to Ohio State in Loyola, Maryland, and it was not in lacrosse. It was in basketball. So the Binghamton Bearcats are 1-4. In the MAAC, the MAC, Canisius is 3-0. Beat Boston U, St. Bonaventure, and Buffalo. They'll go to Syracuse on 12-15. They could be undefeated for that game. Can you imagine the media hype?
It would be insane.
Then they're at Temple on the 19th of December, and UNLV on December 22nd. In the Ivy League, Cornell's 1-4. And that's about all the updating I got.
All right.
It's thorough. We learned more than we thought we were going to.
Trivia, Connor's Corner, courtesy of Bruce Connor, the elder statesman of the Connor family.
He gave me the inspiration for the question, not the answer to the question. The research I did centered around national champions. There have been how many national champions out of the current Big East?
The current Big East.
Current Big East.
Louisville's got 1. Or wait a second. How many does Louisville have, Verk?
Well, just tell me how many teams first.
Oh, Louisville, UConn, Villanova, Georgetown, Marquette. That's it.
No.
Oh, Syracuse. Well, I'm thinking they're out, but they're current. Syracuse.
Yes, yeah, absolutely current.
6. And that's it. I'm not missing anybody.
Cincinnati.
Oh, yeah, 1959 or something.
1961 and 62 back-to-back.
Golden age for Bearcat basketball.
You go to that arena. That arena's not very good, but on the one wall, they shine this gigantic spotlight at the national champion 1961, national champion 1962.
Oscar Robinson, right?
No, that was after he was gone.
Who was it?
I don't even think you'd heard of the guys that they had. But
West Virginia
Robinson was gone, I
one?
think, in 59 or 60.
They're not a current Big East member.
Oh, you're right.
Right. But
Jeez.
no.
It's hard to
St.
follow.
John's hasn't.
No.
Providence hasn't.
So out of those,
Seton Hall. Or no, Seton Hall lost to Michigan.
no, you guys got it.
That's it.
So that's the seven. Okay, so of those seven, who's won the most?
UConn.
How many?
3.
Louisville 1. 2.
Louisville's won 2.
You can already see.
86 and 80.
Correct.
Nice work.
Yep.
The
Cincinnati,
80 team was with
Daryl Griffith,
Dr. Duncanstein, and 86 was Purvis Ellison.
Purvis never nervous.
Yep.
Syracuse won.
Georgetown only won. They should have had about 7.
Right.
Syracuse 1. Marquette 1.
Yep.
Cincinnati 2. And that's all.
Villanova won.
Villanova 1.
Yep.
We
All
got
right.
it.
Good. Nicely done. So leveraging onto that, which conference of all the conferences has the most teams of their current lineups that has the most teams that have won national championships?
What current conference?
Current conference lineup. The way it is today, not
It's-
next year.
Yeah, right
It's-
today.
Because once you trade Rutgers off, the whole equation changes.
Well, the Pac-12 has a ton because of UCLA.
No, he's not saying the most teams.
Well, we'll go
okay.
both. We'll go both
Okay.
ways, but you're right.
For the
Right.
Pac-12, if for most total championships.
Pac-12 does have the most total. You're right about
most
that.
teams. I'm leaning towards the Big 12, Big 10. ACC's not in the discussion.
They got
North Carolina, Duke, Maryland, and that's it.
It's not the Big East. I'm going Big East.
Oh yeah, we said 7 in the Big East, right? So let's see if the Big 10 has more than 7. Indiana, Michigan State,
Michigan.
never Wisconsin, right?
Wisconsin has one.
Only Wisconsin, Ohio State.
Illinois.
No,
No.
Illinois doesn't have
No,
any.
none neither is Michigan. That's it. Those 5 is it for
It's 5 in Big Ten. You're
so
right.
it's not them. So the Big 12, you got Texas.
Texas has never won it.
Yeah, that's hard to believe.
This is
but they
basketball,
haven't.
not football.
They haven't. Yeah.
They're in the Final
Well,
Four.
they had Kevin Durant.
Yeah, and they lost in the second round with Kevin Durant.
Kansas.
Kansas, right?
And this is
And the other one, you got to go way back.
Yeah, so it's a Big East.
Well, you didn't exhaust all your conference options, but yeah, it's a Big East. Big East has 7 teams. Next most is
SEC,
not the SEC.
LSU, Arkansas.
LSU's never won.
Even with Shaq,
No. Oh, no. They made the Final Four, I think, that one time
Ricky
in like 87 or 86. 86, they were in the Final Four with him and
Ricky Blanton.
when Louisville won it.
The Pac-12, no, not in terms of number of teams. Yeah, what other conferences are there?
What's your guess for it?
For the second most?
Yeah.
Oh, the second most.
Yeah, Big East is the most.
The Big Ten. That's my guess.
ACC.
Jeremy? Big Ten. Pac-12. UCLA's won 11.
Arizona.
And the rest of this is way back. Cal, Oregon, Stanford, Utah, all won 1.
Wow.
Utah, I think, won the first ever. No, Oregon won the first ever. Utah won in 44. Yeah, it's way back. So the Pac-12 has won 6. Big Ten's won 5. Like you guys named them. ACC's won 4. Or they won more than 4, but 4 teams have.
Carolina, Duke, Maryland, and BC.
No.
NC State.
NC State it
nice,
is.
yeah.
David Thompson, 74.
BC never won one
Producer
way back
had
when.
no.
I thought they used to be good.
They've never been in the Final Four. I don't even know. I can tell you that they've never been in the finals because then I did the next level down. I had a not so busy Thanksgiving holiday, so I can tell you that the runners up too. The Big East is the most runners up in the championship. Seven
Hall,
teams have been
St.
runners
John's.
up. Seton Hall, St. John's. Yep.
Syracuse.
Syracuse twice.
Georgetown.
3 times.
They should have won so many national championships.
Yeah.
Viewing.
Providence was lost in the Final Four.
UConn.
Yeah, Providence never made the finals.
UConn's lost in the final.
UConn
right?
is not.
They haven't lost,
not
in, the
lost in
final?
the finals. That's impressive. They've gone 3 times, won every time.
Yeah, that's the difference between Syracuse and
You're right.
UConn.
Syracuse lost in the final 3 times.
Yep.
And one time was on a miracle shot by Keith Smart. I don't know if you call it a miracle shot, but
we want to talk
he
about
was
that.
well defended. And the other time they had to follow out John Wallace, friend of the show, John Wallace. Yeah, good trivia.
Marquette lost in the
trivia,
finals one
Marquette.
year. Cincinnati lost in the finals one year. Right, it was the year after they won their 2 straight. Then the 3rd year they lost to Loyola, Illinois, I think it was.
They were strong
And
that year.
Villanova lost in the finals once back in like 72 or
Right,
70 or something like that. He said St. John's. He said Seton Hall. So I think that was it at 7. The most obscure conference that's ever won a championship,
How far back do you got to go?
1951.
Oh,
1950.
man.
But this
The Metro.
It's not like UTEP or something like that.
the City University of New York Athletic Conference.
Won the national champion.
See, because City College in New York won. They won the NCAA and the NIT that year in 1950. 50 it was, yeah. They're
Nobody
not. They're
will ever
Division
do
3
that
now.
again?
I mean, they're not even.
Nobody
They're not
will.
Division 1. Patriot League won one. Horizon League won one. Conference USA's got one. A10 has one. West Coast Conference has one.
In recent times, here's a little trivia that I
San
don't have the
Francisco?
answer to.
West Coast Conference, right?
Who?
Bill Russell.
Yeah.
What was the last team to win a national championship not inside a power conference? I probably would say Louisville.
I'd say UNLV.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're right. Louisville was before that. But when Louisville won, they were out of the Metro.
Metro, right. But there was no such thing as power conferences back then either, really.
That's
You know,
true.
football didn't rule the day like it does today.
Yeah.
Memphis could have been one, really.
Memphis could
Oh,
have.
they
Butler,
should have been.
Butler, could
Butler
have.
twice, VCU.
Yeah, I mean that's what's surprising is that recently there have been teams that have gotten there that aren't from the Power 6 or whatever.
They've gotten there but lost in
That's
that
why
final game.
and that's what makes March Madness the best thing going is that you get the the mid majors who get in there and college football where you're not
Never.
going to see a mid major win the national championship ever
No.
because they can't.
Well, some fantastic trivia. Big
That's good. You guys
thanks
did
to
good.
Bruce for
the inspiration.
the inspiration for this week's Connor's Corner. Well, I'm tired. I got up really early to put a turkey in the oven, and we're on the other side of a long Thanksgiving day. But before we put a wrap on this thing, top 5 power rankings. I'll go first with mine. I got Michigan at number 5. Not really impressed with them as a top 5 team with the fact that the way they played Pittsburgh, but they won. A lot of difference between teams that are top 5 caliber, number 1 seeds, is they win all the close games. When it comes right down to it, the best teams know how to pull out wins, and that's what Michigan did against Pittsburgh. So they slide into the 5 spot. Number 4, Ohio State. We'll see them tested early next week in the Big 10 ACC Challenge. Through number 3, Louisville. Number 2, Indiana, I'm more impressed with them than I have ever been after watching them play Georgetown. What I didn't take into account, and I can't even think of his name, Obaniju. What's that guy's name? He was phenomenal. He's everywhere. He's does the little things, and he does the big things too. He's a swingman.
I don't know his name.
Yeah.
But
I know what you're talking about though.
And then number 1, as I proved through logic earlier, Syracuse. So that's my top 5. Verk, who you got?
I got Michigan 5, same as you. My number 4 team is new to my power rankings this year, and it's Duke. They're not really a friend of the Upstate Hoop Show, but the way Mason Plumlee's playing this year, he's putting up big numbers. They got 3 seniors. They just beat a previously undefeated Minnesota team by 20.
Yeah.
They're good. I think they're best team in the ACC this year by far, and I look for them to have another great year. I got Syracuse number 3. I'm still waiting to Still a little leery on the offensive side of things. I think their defense is going to be just fine. And then number 2, Louisville. They got great defense. They've been scoring the ball pretty good this year. They got they're good everywhere. Backcourt, front court. They got great defense with Dang blocking all the shots. And number 1, I still got Indiana. They faced a tough test from a good Georgetown team, and Georgetown was down 5, minute and a half to go, came back, tied it up, and Indiana was able to prevail in overtime. But I guess till somebody beats Indiana, they're going to be in top of my rankings.
Brad.
Not a lot, not very different from last week. Number 5, I said I'd keep him in until I have any reason to not, is Creighton. And you mentioned a few games they'll have as tests coming up. They haven't really played too many noteworthy games, but they've got a few coming up. In fact, they're in this Las Vegas Invitational this week. They play Wisconsin first round, and then potentially Arkansas after that. So we'll see them get tested, hopefully. But I think they'll come through, and pretty high on Creighton. Number 4, Louisville. I'm not completely sold on them being a top 1 or 2 team yet. I need to see Peyton Siva be consistent with that offense, but I think 4 is a good spot for them. 3, Syracuse. I'm not sure I learned very much from Wagner and Princeton, quite honestly, so I didn't change them from 3 from last week. 2, Ohio State. Really excited about that Ohio State-Duke game this week. I think that's going to tell us a lot about both those teams, and I think that's going to shake up somebody's power rankings one way or the other. And number 1, Indiana, again, survived a real good test against Georgetown, and that's the type of win that real good teams dig deep and make happen, and I think they're very solid number 1.
Brandon, you got top 5 for us? Speak into the mic. There you go.
Number 5, Ohio State.
How come?
They just
Play good basketball?
Because you live in Ohio.
no, I don't like them.
Yeah, they're 4 in my rankings. I agree with you. Go on.
For Syracuse, I haven't seen them too much tested yet.
Yeah, good
Other
point.
than
Good
number
point.
20.
Yeah.
San Diego.
Against
That wasn't
San Diego,
really.
right?
That was a weird game.
That wasn't
A real basketball game. You're right.
Florida, number 3.
Florida.
They're just always good at really everything.
Yeah.
That's
For
true.
me. Duke, 2.
Why
Beat
Duke 2?
Kentucky.
Oh, okay.
That
It's
is.
a good win.
Good
You're
evidence.
right. That is
It's a
good
great win.
And then Indiana. It won. They just crushed everyone.
That's true.
He may have the best top 5 of us all.
He might be right, spot on with that top 5.
He must have been daydreaming earlier, though, when I was talking about why Syracuse was the best team in the country.
What did you say about Ohio State? All right, we'll come back to it next week.
What about the Bearcats?
Yeah, what's your take on the Bearcats this season, being from Bearcat country?
They haven't been tested yet at all.
You're
They
right.
dominate everyone.
Yeah. Who's your favorite player on that team?
Kilpatrick.
Kilpatrick, yeah.
Better coach, Mick Cronin or Jim Boeheim?
Probably Jim Boeheim.
Nice. This could be a new segment. Ask a third grader. He may be one of the most knowledgeable third graders in the country when it comes to college
yeah,
basketball.
I'd take him over most adults.
He's in the basement with me watching college basketball pretty much every night.
Cronin might be the shortest coach in Division 1.
Yeah.
He's not a very big guy, is he?
No. He looks straight up at all of his players.
Yeah.
That's part of it. He just doesn't strike you as a very intimidating guy. I think he just doesn't cast that sort of dominant presence that a lot of elite coaches do.
I like him, though.
Teams play hard for him.
Yeah, no doubt.
Take a look at the week ahead. Syracuse on Sunday, just a few days removed from the taping of this podcast, will host Colgate at 1 o'clock in the Dome, and then they're off through next Friday when they will be at Arkansas as part of the Big East SEC Challenge. So a lot of challenging going on next week. This was Feast Week, Tournament Week, next week's Challenge Week.
All our weeks have to be branded.
Yeah, that's how you make the money. That's why I don't understand. So we'll be back next Thursday night to talk about that before that Arkansas game. Also, a reminder, the starting backcourt for the Miners Academy Blue Devils will join us live in studio next Thursday night at 9 p.m. right here on the Upstate Hoops podcast. Thanks again for joining us. for this special holiday edition of the Upstate Hoops podcast. And a special Thanksgiving treat having Brad Connor here with us with his son Brandon in studio this week. Thanks to our sponsors, Madej Miris, Ricky, Generations Bank, and the Omen Theater. For Brad Connor, Matt Verke, our producer Jeremy Hunt, I'm Jim Sinacropi. Have a great holiday weekend, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
www.fingerlakes1.com